Boys and girls, please write your first name, last name, and date at the bottom of your Scholastic News. March is Women's History Month. The Sweet Story of Candyland. A woman named Eleanor Abbott invented Candyland more than 70 years ago. It was more than just a fun game. It helped sick kids feel better. Please write your first name, last name, and date at the bottom of your Scholastic News. The Queen of Candyland. Eleanor Abbott invented one of the most famous board games of all time. As you read, think about why Candyland was so important for kids in the hospital. The story of Candyland begins in a surprising place, a hospital room. The problem: bored kids. It was the year 1948. A disease called polio was making a lot of kids sick. Polio made it hard for them to breathe and move their bodies. Kids were stuck in the hospital while they got better. There wasn't much to do. They couldn't move around much. They were homesick and lonely, and they were bored. A woman named Eleanor Abbott was in the hospital with polio too. She was a school teacher. She saw how bored the kids were. She knew they needed something fun to distract them from being sick. Fun in a land of candy. She came up with a game for the kids to play. It was about a magical world of sweets. Eleanor called it Candyland. Right away, the kids loved it. Having polio meant they couldn't run around or leave the hospital, but they could have fun pretending to explore magical candy mountains and peppermint stick forests. The best part of the game was that kids could play it all by themselves. No grown-ups needed. The rules were simple and there wasn't anything to read. The game helped kids have fun during their time in the hospital. A sweet little game. Eleanor's friends thought the idea could become a real game. Eleanor sketched it out on paper. She took it to the Milton Bradley Game Company. The company came up with a slogan to write on the box: "A sweet little game for sweet little folks." The game came out in 1949. It was a big hit. In the 1940s and 1950s, a lot of kids had to stay at home. Parks and beaches had shut down because people were afraid of catching polio. Candyland was something fun for the kids who were stuck inside. Over time, doctors came up with better medicine for polio. By 1970s, polio was mostly gone from the United States, but Candyland is still around. About 1 million games are sold every year. Eleanor Abbott's sweet little game made kids happy for more than 70 years. By Blair Rainsford. Candyland in the 1950s. Candyland today. Kids in a hospital team, kids on a baseball team visit polio patients in the hospital. Women invented that. Read this chart about toys invented by women. Then answer the questions. We have toy, who invented it and when, and fun fact. The first toy is finger paints. Who invented it and when? Ruth Faison Shaw invented them around 1929. Fun fact, she came up with a special paint that was safe for kids' skin. The next toy is the Barbie dolls. Who invented it and when? Ruth Handler invented them in 1959. Fun fact, she named them after her daughter Barbara. The next toy is Monopoly. Who invented it and when? Lizzie Magie invented it in 1903. Fun fact, the game's first name was the Landlord's Game. Interesting. Question 1. Which toy did Ruth Handler invent? So go up to the chart, look for the name Ruth Handler. Was it the finger paints, Barbie dolls, or Monopoly? Question 2. Which toy was invented first? Finger paints, Barbie dolls, or Monopoly? Go up to the chart, look at the dates, and which date came first? Was it finger paints, Barbie dolls, or Monopoly? What was the first name for Monopoly? Did they call it Candyland? Did they call it the Landlord's Game? Did they call it Monopoly? What was the first name for the game Monopoly? Question 4. Which inventor had a daughter named Barbara? Was it Ruth Faison Shaw? Was it Ruth Handler? Or was it Lizzie Magie? Which one of these three inventors had a daughter named Barbara? Look for that answer in the chart. Don't forget your first name, last name, and date before you hand it in.
Inventors. What would life be like without electric lights? At night, your home would be completely dark. You couldn't see to read. You could bump into things. What a problem! Thanks to Thomas Alva Edison, we don't have to worry about that. He invented the first light bulb that worked well. He was an inventor. Inventors are people who solve problems. How do you invent something? First, you have to find a problem. Then, you brainstorm solutions for the problem. Next, you test out your solutions to see what works. When you have an invention that works, you name it and you let people know about it. Sometimes other people don't see that your invention is a good idea right away. A woman named Mary Anderson noticed a problem while she was riding in a city streetcar during a sleet storm. So much sleet fell onto the windshield that the driver could barely see. She invented something to solve the problem. Windshield wipers. Windshield wipers didn't become popular right away. But can you imagine driving in a car with no windshield wipers today? Inventions often help people. Louis Braille wanted to help blind people read. They could not see the words. He was blind himself. So, when he was 15 years old, he invented an alphabet made of raised dots. A blind person can feel the dots and read the words.
Boys and girls, you're going to do some cause and effect. An effect is something that happened. A cause is why it happened. Fill in the chart below. Use the hints for help. So here we have the causes and here we have the effects. So the first effect is kids were bored in the hospital. You have to go back and write down why kids were bored in the hospital. It says, hint, why were the kids in the hospital? So go into your Scholastic News, find out why kids were in the hospital to begin with. Second effect, the kids felt free and had fun in the hospital. Why? What did Eleanor do to help the kids feel free in the hospital? Look in your Scholastic News. The next one is, excuse me, parks and beaches were shut down in the 1940s and 50s. What is the cause of that? It says, hint, what were people afraid of in the 1940s and 50s? Look back in your Scholastic News for the answer. The last effect is millions of games are sold every year. What was the cause? Did people like Eleanor's game? Look back in your Scholastic News and write down the answer. Then, boys and girls, I have a bonus item. You can design your own board game. You can take this home and bring it back, or you can do it now. You can come up with the theme of the game. Will your game have a lot of candy or something else? The title of your game, like Candyland or Monopoly. What's the title of it? How do you win the game? Do you have to collect the most cards? Do you have to get rid of all of your cards? Do you have to get to the finish line? How do you win? How many players does your game need? Is it one player? Do you need to have two people? Can you have three or more? How many players are playing? Materials needed to play. Do you need a game board? Do you need cards? Do you need dice? Do you need any other special materials like Play-Doh or clay or something? Maybe a marker and a piece of paper? What materials go here? And then the rules of the game. How do you play them? And then on the second page, you can put your title of your game here and plan out your game. Can't wait to see what you come up with.